Hey, welcome everybody to another edition of Safe Conversations, and we're glad that you are checking in with us. And really, we're talking about a very serious subject today. And I think I need to say to start with that this is for mature audiences only, really, as we're going to discuss the subject of sexual abuse, which is all over the headlines today from back when Harvey Weinstein and the Hollywood to the political Supreme Court nominee and the Me Too movement. And something I'd like for us to discuss in the future is it's actually entered the church world. Obviously, the Catholic Church has been dealing with it for years, but back in November of 2018, an article appeared discussing the group that I grew up in, the sexual abuse within the Independent Baptist movement, and then now just recently, your group, Southern Baptist Convention, is really getting hammered with this report that's out on sexual abuse. So it's on everybody's mind. It's a discussion that is worthy of our time, and I've got some stats here to kind of kick us off.
That'd be good.
And it's just incredible. And from the Advocacy Center, it says 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys are sexually abused before the age of 18.
Mm-hmm.
The Center for Disease Control has 1 in 4 and 1 in 6. But either way, this is
bad news either way.
Unbelievable. So I'm thinking about the teacher that's looking out in that school classroom of 30 kids, 20 kids.
Yes.
And you start looking at 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 4 boys, or 1 in 5 boys. My goodness.
Yes.
You got a classroom that's got 3 or 4 in every class that's statistically been sexually abused. There are more than 42 million survivors of sexual abuse in America, according to the National Association of Adult Survivors of Child Abuse. According to the National Sex Offenders Registry, a typical pedophile will commit 117 sexual crimes in a lifetime.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's stunning. According to Child Sex Abuse Prevention and Protection Center, child sexual abuse can happen anywhere in any neighborhood, religion or church group, racial or ethnic group, or among the rich, the poor, everywhere in between. Child Sex Abuse Prevention and Protection Center also says there is no sex offender profile. Abusers can be anyone.
Yes.
Family members, neighbors, friends, doctors, coaches, youth leaders, clergy members. Many times these respected abusers remain undetected. Let me just go on here with a few more because this is just startling.
No, that's good. Go ahead.
U.S. Department of Justice, more than 90% of sexual abuse is committed by someone the victim knows, loves, or trusts. Wow. National Center for Missing and Exploited Children says that nearly 500,000 registered sex offenders in the U.S., of them, 80,000 to 100,000 of them are missing. We don't know where they're at.
Yep.
These are offenders that we don't have any idea where they're at.
Still doing what they were doing,
if
they're out there. Yeah.
And like the one, if they commit 117 sex crimes, and there's that many, this gets alarming.
Astronomical.
It really does. According to Child Molestation Research and Prevention Institute, 95% of sexual abuse is preventable through education and awareness. Wow. The National Sex Offenders Registry said that the FBI estimates that there is a sex offender living in every square mile in the United States.
That's
wow.
That's like scary is what that's like.
That is scary. Incredible. Child Sex Abuse Prevention and Protection Center says 30% of sexual abuse is never reported. So, and the U.S. Department of Justice says that most sexual abuse happens to children between the ages of 7 and 13. So, on and on we could go, and these things. They talk about protection, prevention, identification, but I think kind of for us, we might touch on some of those things. But Paul, with your expertise, maybe the area of healing, because we're going to talk to some individuals who are they've gone through it, they're going to be listening, or they know of a loved one that's gone through it. And so kind of how to deal with that. So I was thinking just kind of turning it over, and maybe we can talk about possible signs, long-term consequences, side effects, those kind of things. So a person walks in to see you, and they confess that between the age 7 and 13 where this happens, maybe they've experienced sexual abuse. So how do you begin to work with that situation?
No, and I think that's a good scenario of to focus on the healing of that. I guess I'm wondering for our audience, as I'm hearing you read stats, and I'm familiar with stats, so it's not the first time I've heard those. I'm just wondering what the emotional pulse of those that are watching or listening. There's an automatic sort of push away from the ugliness of it. There's this, gosh, does he have to keep reading those stats?
Right.
You know, nothing against the stats or reading them, but there is this visceral sense of this is so wrong and so heinous, and whatever evil, dark word we want to put with it, that is just unsettling. And the very thing that stops the healing process is us not pushing the feeling of the evil or the dark way, but pushing the person away. Does that make sense?
I think it does.
It easily translates into just don't come around us because
we don't want to talk about it.
Man,
Because obviously, you know, there would be an incredible, an embarrassment factor anyway. And then, you know, is anybody going to believe me anyway? There's so many factors that kind of impact a person disclosing this anyway. But I think you're probably right, because when I read it, it's almost like, please, do we have to talk about this?
Yes. So just people identifying, Fred, that could be their experience even as they bring up. How can you not bring up some type of image, something that reminds you of that, even if it's on the less intrusive end?
Right.
So when I see somebody, what I think is, gosh, what a courageous person to be willing to talk about something this private. They have probably, if they're adult, have already attempted to talk to somebody. One of the stats I remember said that a child will reveal that they've been abused, sexually abused, one time on an average, and then they don't tell anybody else anymore.
Oh, really?
Now, what does that say? That the child even knows that, gosh, I shouldn't be talking about this, or because of the shame. So I validate them. I want my office, or if it were a small group support for abuse victims, I want them to know that's a safe place. And I think it takes tremendous courage.
And I'm glad you said that. I think for anybody that's watching and listening to us right now, to be able to look them in the eye and say, for you to be able to talk about this requires an incredible amount of courage.
Yes.
And and that there are, I think what I also heard you saying is that there are safe places for individuals to talk about this.
Yes.
But also, can I just ask, I mean, what, for the person out there that's, they realize it takes courage, they just still are like, this happened to me, I don't want to talk about it because I've dealt with it. You know, I dealt with it a long time ago, but maybe there are effects that they don't even realize. This is impacting them. It's impacting them in their relationships. It's impacting them as parents. It's impacting them on the job.
Yeah, you would see with a person who's had abuse, addictions. You've got to do something with that pain. I mean, it's like if a person were to get a bad laceration cut on their arm, you're going to have to do something with it. Whether you go drink alcohol to make the arm not hurt, whether you cover it up and don't tell anybody and try to fake that it's not hurting, it's going to impact you. Now, there is a difference between a single perpetration versus years of it. I understand that there is that difference.
Yeah.
I'm not saying a person can't work through it. What I am saying, though, is most of them are going to need somebody to help them, whether it's a professional, whether it's friends. You need somebody. And what happens with the shame is it blocks people from moving toward help. Shame is that one emotion, unlike guilt. Shame says, don't engage somebody. Guilt says, I have done something wrong, I need to repair. So shame actually compounds itself by moving away from the very exposure in a healthy environment that could heal.
And so let's say that I am that person, just for sake of a conversation here. So I'm a person who has this experience in my life of sexual abuse, and shame is the emotion that is overwhelming me. What do you say to me? What would you say to me if you knew that's what I was feeling? Mm-hmm. How would you respond to me?
Often, whether in the counseling setting, and people need to think friendship-wise, because not everybody listening is going to be a therapist or even someone skilled in that area, but there are people, given the stats, all around us. We are rubbing shoulders with these sexually abused people. We're not even talking about physical abuse or emotional abuse or the idea of neglect. We're talking about a very specific slice of the pie. We are rubbing shoulders with them all the time. So our audience could easily see that they're going to run into them. Realize these people have probably attempted to talk about it before. There's already, I believe, Fred, a bias against us as Christians. I think there's a bias, whether it's accurate or not, and they've really been rejected by us. What's coming out now, at least with my denomination, is how we have pushed them away or ignored them or didn't take them seriously. And that has to be so because we are having, in my denomination, Southern Baptist, we are having a outside investigation reveal what we have done. We're not doing it ourselves. So when we run into these people, there's a lot of them, they're going to have their natural shame, and they're going to need to bring it up. I just think having in your mind that it's that frequently experienced out there. Yeah. What I'm going to do is try to be a safe person, not assume everybody's abused. And I mean in friendship. Yeah. So that there's an opportunity that they could say something to me. And if I were untrained, I would refer them, but I would not stop my relationship to them. I believe in, this is my wording, therapeutic friendships. So while, for instance, I'm in counseling, I don't need you to stop being my friend. I need you to stay connected to me in that role, even align yourself with the therapeutic, whether it's the spiritual arena I'm working with therapeutically or emotionally, and help and aid me in that. Hmm.
Yeah, I'm writing some stuff down here because I'm thinking as you're talking that maybe as we do another episode on this subject, there's two things there. Yeah, how can I be a friend to somebody? Maybe that's something we could look at. I'm also thinking if I was a parent out there, are there signs I need to look for with my child? Is there something I can do? And then even some of the effects of it I'd like to continue to talk about. So there's so many things here.
Yes.
But since you just brought up the friendship, maybe we zero in on that for a little bit more. So I'm let's say I'm in a group at church and I've connected and I go out to dinner and my friend just kind of opens up somehow. It's not like, hey, it's the main point of the conversation. It just comes out.
Yeah.
And so what do you recommend for the person untrained, doesn't know the stats, or how can they help their friend?
Yeah, I would say a very natural response for empathy would be, "Wow, I'm really sorry," and it must take a lot of courage to even open that sort of Pandora's box up.
Good. Just so sympathy to say, I may not have gone through that, but wow.
Yeah, I don't have to have gone through it to be a friend.
Right.
I can empathize. I can go, wow, and if it's appropriate and there's time and you're in a place it's possible, I could say, I'd like to hear more if you're comfortable sharing some of that, or if that wouldn't help, you don't need to.
Good.
So what you don't want to do with an abuse survivor or sexual abuse survivor is take control, because control is what damaged them. So I'm always giving the steering wheel back to people that I know have been through sexual abuse.
Ooh, that's really good. That's really good, because sometimes when you're a friend and somebody kind of lays something heavy on you like that, you're instantly thinking, I got to say something. I've got to do something. And so instead of being sympathetic and saying, hey, if you want to talk, like you just said, we tend to try to fix.
Well, we can take that natural tendency to want to fix, but give them the steering wheel to drive this part of their life. And we could say to them, what do you need from me if it's a established relationship? What do you need from me in reference to this particular horrible thing that's happened to you? And then let them say that. Not assume, let's don't mind read where I think I know what's going on in your mind.
Very good. Very good. Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah.
That's really helpful, because there's also something we have to deal with, what we've already referenced early on, was the idea that the subject matter just causes people to shut down. So the worst thing that could happen is if somebody brought that up, you just kind of shut down and change the subject.
Yes.
We've got to be willing to step into that with them.
I do think people, if they could mentally begin to have a simple practice of saying, I have friends, or I may make friends, that have had this horrible experience. So that way, when it comes out, because the stats were, 1 in 3?
For girls.
1 in 5
for boys.
6, something like that. That's a lot of people. When I think about in your congregation, when I'm sitting there in the church, man, they're all out there.
Yeah.
That's not including the ones who, the other types of abuses that are out there. Right. So I think being able to soften and be almost like a door that would sort of open up to them versus close. Now, if a person finds themselves sort of shutting down, they can repair that and go, I just kind of shut down on you there, and sorry about that. I really want to hear and know. I just don't. I guess I'm feeling like I need to do something. We can be, if we're kind of connected to our thoughts and feelings, we can kind of be candid like that.
Good. And then if real quick, back to the control factor, if the individual, again, I don't know this, I would just wonder that maybe they might share it, and then they instantly regret that they shared it.
They could do that.
And then they're like, oh, I can't believe I just said that. And then all of a sudden they don't want to talk about it. And
Can I take that back?
I think what you're suggesting, don't just push in on that then. Because there's that personality of friend that's like, oh, I'm just going to jump right in. That could be damaging as well, right? Let them control.
Let them lead. If you could just remember that little phrase, let them lead. Yeah. And if they start pulling it back, it's appropriate to say, I'm going to be comfortable with, or learn to be comfortable with you talking about this. But if you don't want to, we don't have to. Now, in my professional work, sometimes I can be 3, 4, 5, 6 sessions with someone dealing with depression, which is another mood disorder that comes up with that, or anxiety. Right. And it comes out that something inappropriate happened.
Right.
Well, these are people that are paying, intentionally wanting to work hard on their issues, and it's still hard. And and they would be aware because I tell them in the first session that I'm liable if I leak. So it's not that it's not safe. I want to be a safe person, even though I'm legally held to be safe. So I think that's significant and that's important.
Yeah, and I was just thinking that one of the goals, you and I talked about safe conversations. One of the goals was not only that this would be informative to the people watching,
Mm-hmm.
but that they would see an interaction between us that might model a conversation that's safe. And, one of the things I would say that church has done really well recently is really focused in on the smaller group, the sharing of life.
Yeah.
And if we are seriously creating environments where that's happening, then more than likely this kind of scenario we just described is going to happen.
Yes.
Because if people are carrying this and then all of a sudden they're in an environment for the first time where they feel safe, this kind of thing's going to come out. And I hope that it does. I hope that these conversations can happen.
Yes.
And we can bring these things to light. And, we're kind of at the end of this conversation, and I think we've got another one for sure that we need to at least.
I think so.
At least. And that was some really good stuff, Paul. Thank you for
you're
helping us kind of walk through how to deal with a friend. And then we'll come back at it and do it again. And encourage you to, if you enjoy these, be sure to let your friends know that this is something that can be a very helpful, beneficial to them. So thank you. See you next time.